only available to people who are members of my website, so it won't be lost in the world. Okay, so let's get started. I imagine other people will join as we go along here. And so I ask for your forgiveness up front if it looks like I'm going over to let them in, but I don't have a bunch of elves running around my office doing these things for me. So uh, one of my first, actually the first ground rule in my strategy to recover from OCD, but I apply it in life generally, is I don't have to be perfect at anything. And it allows for such great progress. So hello, everybody. Welcome to Rise Beyond OCD, Answers, Insight, and Inspiration to Move Forward. Today's version of this series is our very first. I'm really excited about it. And now and then you're going to see my cat like run around in here. So just bear with her. Whether you're living with OCD, supporting someone you love, working in the mental health field, this is a caring space where we can learn, connect, and find hope together. Just a quick reminder, what we share today is meant for education and support. It is not a substitute for professional care, even though you're going to hear from one of the brightest in the business. I want to make that clear to everybody. If you find yourself in crisis, please reach out. You can call or text 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, or 911 if there is an immediate danger. For international support, you can visit findahelpline.com. There's a lot of great resources on there. Remember that you are not alone. Healing and recovery are possible, and we're here to move forward together. Before I introduce our special guest today, a couple of housekeeping items. Today's interview is being live streamed publicly in honor of OCD Awareness Week. So I'm not even sure what the proper, if you say happy OCD Awareness Week, it's OCD Awareness. How about that? It's OCD Awareness Week. The interview, like all of the other interviews in this series, is being recorded for later viewing by members of my Unconditional Commitment Club. To join the club, you can go to my website, www.ocdrecoveryturningpoints.com. For this call, everyone will be muted and your videos will be off. If you want to be on, send me something in the chat, but everyone's going to be muted except Dr. McIngvale and myself. The chat room is open. I ask everyone to be respectful of others and maintain decorum. At the end of this, you will have the ability to ask questions of our guest. Put them in the chat. I will go through them, and then I will read the questions to Dr. McIngvale, just so we can maintain some pace as we go through this. With that, it is my great honor to introduce Dr. Elizabeth, or Liz McIngvale. She's the director of the OCD Institute of Texas, a specialized residential and intensive treatment center for OCD. Dr. McIngvale was diagnosed with severe OCD as a young girl, underwent exposure and response prevention therapy, and now successfully manages OCD. At the age of 18, she became the spokesperson for the International OCD Foundation, more commonly called the IOCDF. Dr. McIngvale is the founder of Peace of Mind Foundation, a nonprofit organization for people with obsessive compulsive disorder. She also founded and runs the OCD Challenge website, which is a free self-help website for OCD. Dr. McIngvale serves on multiple nonprofit boards, including the board of directors of the International OCD Foundation, and is an advocate and speaker for mental illness on a national platform. Dr. McIngvale completed her bachelor's degree in 2009 and master's in 2010 from Loyola University in Chicago. She earned her PhD from the University of Houston's Graduate College of Social Work in 2014 and her Master's of Business Administration degree from the Kellogg School of Business Management at Northwestern University. She is an adjunct assistant professor at Baylor College of Medicine. Ladies and gentlemen, let's please welcome one of my personal heroes and role models, Dr. Elizabeth McIngvale. So
Thank
Dr.
you, Shannon.
McIngvale,
And please call me Liz, but thank you, thank you. I'm so
okay,
happy to be here and just excited to spread awareness, education, all the things during OCD week, but of course, any week and with you anytime. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
you are just special to me. I've admired you for years. I was the keynote speaker at the IOCDF annual conference in DC in 2010, and I think I met you shortly thereafter. And you at that time you were already a superstar in that world,
I
right? A
don't know
superstar. And
about
like,
that.
wow, who's this? This Liz McIngvale. Who is she? Who is she? And then I met you. And you've been nothing but tremendously kind to me as a just as a person. I want to thank you for that. But you're that way with everyone you meet, right? Everyone feels comfortable immediately when they get to know you. And so as you and I were in the work up to this, and I was reaching out to the icons and this series for everybody to know. I mean, I feel very grateful and blessed, but I was able to get the icons of the recovery community, and everyone's going to learn a whole lot over the course of this. And so it is completely special to me and appropriate for you to be the very first guest for this series, because I think over the course of the series, and you've seen the list of people who are on this, it is the greats, and so I just want to thank you for being the first one here. You're a beacon for recovery of people everywhere who suffer, and you probably know that, but if no one's ever told you that, I'm telling you, you are a beacon of recovery for people everywhere. Your personal story, how you overcame adversity, um, and then became a therapist and one of the most knowledgeable people about this subject on the planet. It's an amazing story, and I'm excited for the people who are on here to be able to hear you and ask you a question if they have it. But I'm truly honored that you're here. So,
Thank you.
without
Well,
further
I'm
ado,
excited to be here, and I really appreciate that. And I think that you and I both got to learn from some of the same greats together of Michael Janicki and a lot of the people
yeah,
who paved this path for us and really were telling us when we were struggling, right, that help is available and it really can work. And I think it was a no-brainer for both of us that we have dedicated our life to helping other people because people did that for us. So it's really an honor to get to do it. I don't think either of us see it as this I have to or it's a job. This is really our passion and our life mission. And I think that's very different than feeling like you're clocking in or out to any sort of career.
absolutely. I've told people I could do this forever, right? I mean, there's no expiration because we are passionate about it, and we know a lot of people who are passionate about it, and there's strength in numbers there. All right, let's get started here. Really, at the beginning for you, I've got a couple of questions that I'll just put them together, and then you can address it however you want to. First, can you tell us how OCD affected you? How old were you when you were diagnosed? Knowing what you know now, can you pinpoint a time before you were diagnosed when you can say, yeah, that was probably OCD. And then how old were you when you can, after you've done that, how old were you say, okay, it really started to have a negative impact on my life. So just
Yeah.
generally tell us your story.
Yeah. So I always had little quirks as a kid. My mom talks about little things I did. So, for example, when I would read, I would always start the book at the first page and I couldn't use a bookmark. And my mom would say, Liz, like there's bookmarks. And I'd say, yeah, but like I can't start in the middle. I couldn't, there was something that felt really off or wrong about that. I would track the weather and I would watch the news and tell my family if there was a tornado in Topeka and they'd say something like, well, good thing I live in Houston, so it doesn't matter, but I would worry a lot about it and kind of be preoccupied and a little obsessional about it. However, I was functioning. I was a competitive gymnast. I did well academically. I had friends. So they're really, you definitely, I think my parents would say from an early age, they noticed quirks. But even going back now, they wouldn't have thought anything of it. It wasn't impacting my life. It wasn't impacting my functioning. It was really a quirk, right? It was just these little things that you do as a kid. I've got kids now. I see things, see their own stuff all the time where you're like, okay, what is this? Or why are you worried about that? And I think it's honestly, it stayed like that for a good, 10, 12 years of my life. And I had these little quirks. My mom would say I was a little bit more rule governed. I was a little bit more of her kind of anxious rule following kid, but there wasn't anything really out of the norm where she would say something is going on or we need to approach this, right? Teachers weren't telling her, other people weren't saying anything. I really appeared to be functioning pretty normally. As the individual with OCD, I will tell you, I probably started to have intrusive thoughts and engage in some different ritualistic behavior for at least 6 months before I told anybody. So there was definitely a time, I would say I was probably between 11 and 12, where I started to have lots of different triggers around contamination, scrupulosity, these different subtypes. And I would do these internal compulsions or repeating compulsions or washing compulsions to feel better, but I didn't talk about it. And of course I didn't talk about it. No one had ever talked to me about mental health. Nobody had ever talked to me about anxiety or OCD. I was terrified to tell somebody what was going on. I knew these thoughts didn't make sense. I knew they were abnormal. So why would I tell somebody that I was having these weird thoughts and that these things were happening? And so I really kind of kept it to myself. But at about the age 13, there came a point where I really couldn't hide it anymore. My OCD had become more pervasive. At this point, I started taking longer showers. I was losing weight. I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't eating well. And I was really starting to become riddled with anxiety, right? It was starting to be a part of my daily life. I couldn't really function the way I used to. I started to ask my mom a lot of reassurance questions or do a lot of repeating behavior that I couldn't hide anymore. So she would notice me going in and out of a doorway or back and forth over a rug or touching things a certain way. And also she started to notice distress and avoidance behaviors, right? I started to avoid being around some of my friends or doing things I used to really enjoy or like. And I know I did that because I didn't want to deal with the triggers that might came or, what I would have to deal with. But as a parent, she didn't notice that. So about the age 12, 13, it was pretty clear that something was going on. And that's when my family started to try to figure out what's happening and what is this.
Sorry, I had to go on mute because my neighbors are mowing the grass for some reason. They picked today
No
at this
problem.
time. I think you answered my second question. It was, what was the actual turning point for you and your family, right? That
Around treatment.
around treatment, where your mom and dad, or mom or dad,
Yeah.
said, "Hey,
It's
you know what?"
actually like a pretty specific story. My mom had been noticing these behaviors, but nobody else was noticing them. I hid them in front of other people, as most people with OCD do, right? You're really ashamed. And I felt really safe and comfortable with my mom. So she would see some of these rituals and compulsions, but I hid them around a lot of other individuals. And I was in the 7th grade and I was going on this, like they call it a trip to Mo Ranch here in Texas, but it's like this school class trip, right? Where you go on this bus and you go to this like team building sort of environment for about a week. And my sister was a year older than me. She was going to DC the next day. And so I was supposed to go stay the night at a friend's house that night. And my mom needed to drive my sister to the airport the next morning. And so I'm getting ready to go to my friend's house, and I start just all of a sudden asking my mom all these reassurance questions. I started saying things like, Mom, Taryn and them put their dogs in crates. And like, what if when their dogs are in a kennel, they're going to put their dogs in a kennel because I'm going over there. And so what if something happens? And if something happens to the dogs, will that be my fault since I'm the one going there? And what if I packed clothes like Taryn and I'm copying her and she's going to think I'm copying her and like she's upset with me? And if she's upset with me, could she hurt herself? And if she hurts herself, would it be my fault? And I started asking all these questions that I knew I had been triggered by for a while, but I had been holding them in. But for me, this trip was so anxiety provoking that it kind of hit the tip of the iceberg that evening. And so my mom's response was like, Liz, if it's causing you that much anxiety, like you don't have to sleep at Taryn's house. Your brother will drive you in the morning. Like it's fine. And so in the morning, my brother drove me to school. And on the way of driving me, because my mom had to drive my sister to the airport, my brother, this is back in the day, right? I'm older than most people on this call, as we are, Shannon. But like my brother asked me to put a CD in the CD-ROM. I know we don't use those anymore. And I grabbed the CD and I start putting it in and out, in and out. And I'm counting and I'm doing these different behaviors. And then as we're driving, I start asking my brother, I'm like, do you think mom and Laura made it to the airport okay? Do you think they're safe? What if something happened to them? Like, do you think something bad might happen? What do you know? And I start asking my brother all these reassurance questions. So he kind of answers them. He's like 16, 17 at the time. He doesn't know what's going on, right? And he drops me off. And my mom talks about two things happening that week that were like her moments of being like, whoa, something is really going on. The first was my brother got home from school and said to him, he said, Mom, I don't know what's going on with Liz, but she was asking all these strange questions and doing these repetitive behaviors. And it was really odd in the car. And that was such an important moment for my mom because it was the first time somebody else validated that something was going on, right? She had been kind of noticing these behaviors, but I didn't really do them in front of other people. And so she kind of was like, is this just me or is this like, what is this? Like, am I over exaggerating? So it was very validating for her to hear my brother say, like, something is strange, something is off. I don't know what's going on. And then she picked me up 5 days later. And as most of you can imagine, 5 days at a camp environment with a child with untreated OCD was an absolute disaster. I didn't eat, I didn't sleep. I
Oh, no.
probably didn't really shower in the community showers. And it was like the worst recipe anybody could have ever put together for me to have to face and be a part of. And so my mom talks about when she came to pick me up and I stepped off the bus, that was the moment that she had a pit in her stomach and she knew something is really wrong. And that is when for her, this could no longer be looked at as quirks or, Liz just having her things, that this is when she knew there was something else happening. And so that night we got home and I was a complete wreck. You could tell I was totally disheveled, just had been completely emotionally and physically totally drained all week. And we got home and I was crying and shaking. And I remember I was having like a panic attack, but I remember I didn't know what that was, of course, at the time. But I remember telling my mom, I said, Mom, I don't know what the word ritual means, but I feel like I have to do all these rituals all day long. And that word makes sense for what's happening. And my mom said, well, Liz, that's not true. Like, things can't, that's not how it works. Like, I would say things like, if I don't do this, I think something bad's going to happen to y'all, or you're not going to go to heaven and it's going to be my fault. And she would say, but it's not true. And I was like, yeah, I do, but I can't stop doing it. And that's when my mom and family, knew very quickly that they needed to do something. And so they started searching. I grew up and I live here in Houston, world's largest medical center in the United States, access to amazing healthcare. And we didn't have any OCD providers. And so we went from
Wow.
clinician to clinician. And I finally got diagnosed, which was amazing, and it was important and amazing to get an effective diagnosis. But the provider, even who diagnosed me, was like, I've never seen a case like this. Like, I don't know what to do. This case is way too severe. And we just kept being told that. So we kept searching for treatment, hoping that we would find somebody here, as you would think you would have been able to at the time, that could effectively treat my illness, and we couldn't. So we just continued to be at a total standstill. And as we all know, with untreated OCD, it just gets worse. And so I just continued to deteriorate from that point forward.
Okay, so take us through then treatment. What
Yeah.
happened? And just generally
Yeah.
describe, you can specific as you want to be, but take it from when you started, what happened, what was the treatment, and
Yeah. So
and you don't have to be.
I
Go
remember
ahead.
my parents and my mom taking me to providers here in town. And I remember we would go in and they would like play Candyland with me and ask me when I crossed the bridge how I felt. And I remember at one point looking at a provider and saying, I'm crossing a bridge on Candyland. How do you feel? Like, what are we doing here? Right. And I was smart enough to be like, what is happening? Like, this is not my problem. Like, my problem is not Candyland and needing to talk. It's like, I am stuck ritualizing for 6 to 8 hours and I need help. And at this point, I'm taking 6 to 8 hour showers. My parents are pulling me out of the shower because we'd run out of hot water and it was freezing. I'd be shaking. I thought an entire side of my body was contaminated, so I could only use like the left side of my body. And getting dressed, everything I did, I would do things in multiples. So my mom at the time, I had a lot of scrupulosity, so I was afraid of the number six. But at the time, my mom's age was 42, which makes no sense because 4 + 2 is 6. But for whatever reason, I felt like I needed to do things 42 times to like counteract her bad age, or I don't know why. And so I did everything in the day 42 times, right? I'd get up from bed. I would sit up and down 42 times, turn my body 42 times, move my left foot forward 42 times to take my first step. And by the time I got to the bathroom, I was just exhausted. I would be sweating and crying, and I would turn the faucet on 42 times, get 42 pumps of soap, rinse my hand off 42 times, turn the faucet back off 42 times. And then my OCD would say that's one set. You should do 42 sets of 42. And so, as you can imagine, at this point, any activity was a nightmare. I think so many people who don't understand OCD just don't have they have no awareness and understanding of like the severity of OCD, number one, but also number two, of just the way OCD can really impact everyday things. I always tell people, like, most people are grateful for like a new car or this fancy thing. And like, I'm grateful that I can wear whatever clothes I want out of my closet, that I can take a shower and actually kind of enjoy it, but it not be this daunting task, right? Because that's what OCD impacted, and what it impacts. It impacts just basic things that we never even think to be grateful of, basic levels of functioning, which are so detrimental when they're taken away from you because of it. And so we kept searching for treatment and kept finding providers who, again, could say I had OCD, but we were hearing things like, this is the worst case we've ever seen. There's not treatment available for your child. You should accept she'll live in a mental health hospital the rest of her life. And we really didn't get anywhere. And fast forward about 2 or 3 years, by the time I was 15, my dad was working. We have a family business, and my dad runs our furniture store, and he was working at the store and opened the Houston Chronicle, which is our local paper. And there was this tiny excerpt about an inpatient clinic called the McIngvale Clinic that some Houstonians were trying to bring to Houston in the future. And as he was reading that, he saw they had an OCD program. And so within like 30 seconds, he called my mom and he's like, Linda, we got to call this place. So like they get on the phone together. And within a short amount of time, they realized that McIngvale in Topeka, Kansas at the time had a residential program for adolescents. It's the only one in the country. And they quickly moved. And by February 5th of 2002, so I was 15, my parents took me to McIngvale, and it was an awful experience going there. I, at this point, didn't think I could get better. I didn't think treatment could work. I really felt like I was going to struggle forever. It's what I'd been told. I kind of just accepted that. And I really wasn't willing to do any more treatment and work, because to date, it had been such a waste of time. And honestly, always made me feel worse than better. So it was like no point in continuing to try that. And so my parents knew they had to get me there, but they didn't know how. And so they made a choice to literally kind of kidnap me. They told me that I had an orthodontist appointment. All my family was home, and they did an intervention. They had a really good family friend of ours, bless his heart, who was a Navy SEAL Medal of Honor winner, like literally there to tackle me. And it was an insane experience. Looking back, I'm like, why'd you do what you did? But my mom would tell you that she might do things a little different in like the day, but that she would have done it all over again, right? Time and time again, because she knew that I wasn't going to go voluntarily. And she knew I had to make a choice for myself that I couldn't make at the time. And she had to make that choice for me. And so for her, it was the last kind of sliver of hope that I could get better, and that if they could just get me to right treatment, that might actually help. And so we flew to Topeka. My parents dropped me off. It was a terrifying day. I was vomiting. I was so anxious. I was so upset. I really thought this was like the beginning of my parents dropping me off at a place I thought I would be for the rest of my life. It's what I had been told. And 2 things happened that day that I will always remember. The first is I was crying, and I sat down on the couch, and I was looking across of this young, thin, little redhead girl named Amy. And Amy looked at me, and all she said that day is, "It's okay, I cried too." And for the first time in my life, and you know the power of this, Shannon, as do all of you here today, I realized I wasn't the only one going through this. It was my like exposure to the fact that like, oh, like other people get it. Other people are struggling. I'm not the only one with OCD. I'm not the only one struggling to this degree. And then the second thing, which of course was the most important piece in my journey, was I met a clinician who knew what they were doing. And for the first time, I sat across the table from a clinician who wasn't afraid of my OCD, had full confidence that he could get me better and knew exactly what to do to get me better. And I spent the next 90 days or so just, excuse the language, but like busting my ass doing ERP and doing the work I needed to do so that I could get better and go home. And I left that facility just as anxious and upset as the day I came, because when I got there, I was so devastated. But when I left, it was tears because I had my life back. And of course, I was scared. I didn't really want to leave. These people had become my family. They had saved my life. They had changed my life. But I just had so much and still have so much gratitude for that facility and that program and what it did for me.
All right. So in those early days, what kept you going? Right. So you and I both talk to a lot of people who are suffering every day, every minute, and it feels like there is no hope, there is no way forward.
Yeah.
What kept you going in those early days?
Yeah. I mean, candidly, when I was sick without good treatment, not a lot kept me going. And my faith is what I held on to, the belief and understanding that there was something bigger than what I could see or understand, and that I could get better despite not knowing or believing that. Of course, that was critical for me. Yet the reality is that like I didn't, my parents kind of held on to hope for me when I had lost all of it. But what kept me going the second I arrived at Menninger at the time, which is where I was, is knowing that there were other people, but also knowing that there were clinicians who had treated OCD as severe, or if not more severe than my case, and knowing that with effective treatment, I really could get better. And then knowing I had to work my ass off, right? And I'm grateful that I learned and grew up and understand from a family that I did, that like my dad's preaching is like work is life's greatest blessing. And like my parents have a very strong work ethic and they instilled that in us. And so I wasn't afraid of doing the work. I wasn't afraid of putting in the work. I had grit. I had those things you need to find, right? Like those existed. I just needed to tap into them. And I was willing to if I thought I could get better. And so I actually kind of made a pact with my clinician when I first got there. I said, I'll give you 2 weeks and I'll do everything you tell me to do. And if I get better, I get to go home in 2 weeks because I didn't want to be there. Right. And he was like, okay, that's fine. Like if you do everything I say, and if you are totally better in 2 weeks, you can go home. And of course, in 2 weeks, I wasn't better. But in 2 weeks, I had success in treatment already. And I didn't even care to go home at that point because I believed his treatment could work and I believed I could get better. And I think a lot of times, you guys, we want to have hope that we can get better. We want to feel and know we can get better before we're willing to do the work. And that becomes most people's stuck point, is that unfortunately, you're not going to know you can get better, feel you can get better first. That comes second. And so we have to get up and do the work first. And then we will be amazed at how we will feel and the way our beliefs and understanding about recovery, how it can change.
No words could be truer. When I do peer support with people, the very first thing that I actually focus on is this concept of hope, right? And it is this belief, even of a sliver of a belief, that if I do the work, there's a possibility that something will change for me,
Yeah.
right? But I got to do the work. But it really is that little piece, right? It's a pillar in the foundation, I believe, in recovery. Okay, so as a young woman, you became the IOCDF spokesperson at 18, unheard of. You also were a feature, I want to say ABC News 2020 or something like that. They did a feature on OCD
A lot of them, yeah.
when you were a young, I mean, and you've been all over the
Mhm.
news, but so you were thrust, here's the point, you were thrust into this
Advocate
limelight,
spotlight, yeah.
and the big spotlight, where people are saying, hey, 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 everybody look, there's hope, right? It's kind of like this
Yeah.
young woman So going through that, I'm interested to know what that was like for you going through it, like, spotlight in your eye all the time. And while you're still trying to manage your way
Mhm.
through recovery, maybe the bigger question is, why did you decide to dedicate your life to this cause,
Yeah.
to helping people who suffer the way you did, the way I did? But why? What drives you in that regard?
You know, I'm a believer, whether you have faith or not, but I'm a believer that most of us have a plan in our life that we often don't even know about yet, right? But that there's a reason for things, and they'll show themselves to us in different ways and at different times in our life. And so for me, and by the way, treatment didn't end there, right? I got home, I was 15. I thought I didn't need to continue treatment. I didn't really have an outpatient provider, and I relapsed really significantly. And by the time I was 17, I was really struggling. I was not just homebound, but I was kind of trapped in my room. It was impossible for me to do any tasks. And I had lost a lot of hope because at this point, I started to think, well, if I'm just going to have to do ERP like this and treatment forever, I don't want to do it. It's too much work. It's too hard. And I went back to residential when I was 17. At the time, the same program had moved here to Houston, so it was in my backyard. And candidly, I want to be honest, I didn't have the same results as I did the first time around. I wasn't as motivated. I was a bit pessimistic about my diagnosis, what it would mean for me, acceptance of that, what my life would look like. And I kind of had one foot in and one foot out. I was doing ERP, but just kind of enough to get more functional, but not doing it all the way to actually get freedom, which, by the way, is the only way to do ERP. And we can talk about that later. And so and I blame a lot of honestly advocacy and clinicians at the time. So at the time, and this is still the case, so we need to keep breaking it down, but at the time, there was this belief and understanding that this is how we knew OCD. OCD is a chronic condition that you will have your entire life, but with effective treatment, you can learn to manage your symptoms. Okay. The problem with that is that the way those of us with OCD interpret and understand that is I'm always going to struggle. I'm always going to have OCD at this level that it impacts my life. It's a chronic disease that I can't get rid of. It's incurable. And I have to do ERP just to be able to function, just to be able to manage my symptoms. And you guys, when that's how we're doing ERP, it is exhausting. It is daunting. I don't have to tell you that, you know that. Because all of us have spent time in our journey where we used ERP to function and it was miserable, right? We used ERP every day. I used ERP to make it to class, to go to, to get dressed, to shower, to do these things I needed to do. But I was kind of white knuckling doing ERP where I was like surviving through ERP. I was able to get a shower done or get to class or pass my exams or whatever it needed to be, but I was struggling the whole time. And I unfortunately really accepted and thought that acceptance meant I needed to accept that as my reality, that I had to accept that like that was the best I was going to get. And the best I would get is struggling with while having OCD, struggling, but being able, like, I should be grateful that I can take a shower and I can do these things, even though they're still really hard. And so that's the state I was at, right, at 17, just to kind of lay that groundwork. And we got approached by a local station here in town. My parents are kind of local celebrities here in Houston. And my mom and dad are really big believers that like they are anti-stigma. They are huge faith-based, mission-driven people that like we should do anything we can to serve our community and help other people. And so my parents really believed and still believe, as do I, that we should use our story to help someone else, right? That our story could allow other people to understand mental health better, understand OCD better, get to effective treatment, or that maybe we could increase treatment, access to treatment options. Why does a city like Houston not have an OCD provider? All those things. And so we started, local stations had picked up my story, and I started on local stations and then kind of got thrown into this bigger national advocacy and became the international spokesperson. When IOCDF asked me to do that campaign and be their national spokesperson, I did. And it was the most important decision I could have ever made in my life. And Mike Janicki and I, Dr. Janicki is really the founder of a lot of our ERP treatment, the founder of Higher Levels of Care residential programs, and for sure, one of the forefathers of OCD treatment. And one thing Mike and I always talked about is that one thing that substance use programs in AA really do right is the concept that once you graduate from AA, you become a sponsor. And when you're a sponsor, what do? You take on someone else, right? You start mentoring and helping other people. And not only do you get to take your pain of that you've gone through, but you get to turn it into a purpose, right? You get to help someone else, mentor someone else, feel good about that, feel like there's some sort of purpose to the pain you've gone through. But also, the secondary gain that we know, Shannon and lots of other people, is it helps us, right? As I start helping other people, I'm helping myself. If I'm encouraging you to do ERP, I'm certainly going to be doing my own work, right? I would feel very two-faced if I'm telling you to do yours and I'm ritualizing behind closed doors. And so I think I'll never forget, I did a speech once for Mental Health America with Dr. Drew, and we were talking before our talks together, and he said to me, he said, I had a celebrity once that I was treating, and when I had done some work with them after a session, I said, man, I love your kicks. Like, they had awesome shoes. And he said the next session they showed up with that same pair of shoes, brand new, and gifted it to him. And he was like, oh my gosh, like, yes, I loved your shoes, but I wasn't saying to go buy me a pair. Like, I can't take that. Like, you can't give me a gift. Like, no. And he said, the patient said to him, like, slid the shoes back across the table and said, I need you to take these today because me doing this for you is what's keeping me sober today. And it was such a eye-opening kind of conversation of disorders and what we're struggling with, and our specific symptoms can, of course, be so different across the board. But for most of us, helping other people, turning our pain into purpose, doing some sort of service, letting something good come out of our suffering helps us so much. It provides meaning to something that feels so meaningless and challenging. So anyways, that's how I kind of got thrown into advocacy, and advocacy really changed my life. And I continued to do it 20 years later now, plus, which is kind of crazy to think that I've been doing it for 2 decades, because many times I just still look back and it feels like it was yesterday, right? It also feels like it was 2 decades at the same time. But what I will tell you now is that the way I understand treatment, the way I understand recovery, a cure, whatever we want to call it, is totally different than the way I understood it 20 years ago. And I now understand that you can use ERP to get to full freedom. You do not and should not settle on using ERP to function. And I know that. And guess what? I lived 10, 15 years of my life post-treatment where I was using ERP to function. And I was pretty functional from the outside, right? That's when you knew me and met me, right? I was doing different things. I was the national spokesperson for IOCDF. I was graduating college and starting to treat people. I was still struggling. I was using ERP every day to survive. I did not go all the way. I held on, right? I was like, I'll use ERP, but I still held on to some of my OCD. I still held on to some of those safety behaviors, which in turn totally kept me stuck. And there came a point in my life where, guess what? My life started to get bigger, more beautiful, more meaningful. And I started to say, I don't want to hold on to any of it anymore. And the good news is the way you do ERP doesn't actually really change, right? You know what you need to do. You know how to do it. It's, are you willing? You have to have the willingness to say, I am willing to do ERP all the way. I'm not going to hold on to any safety behaviors. I'm going to do all the things I know I need to do. I'm going to face this fear completely head on so that it has no power over me. And I'm at a point in my life where I have total freedom from my OCD. And I don't say that easily, because I know, and Shannon, that like so many of us, if someone would have said that to us and are struggling, I would have thought it was a hoax. I would have like been totally skeptical and really thought they were quite arrogant to say that. But I say it with full conviction. And I
Yeah.
say it as somebody who now gets to run the exact same residential program that saved my life 20 plus years ago. And I get to watch patients day in and day out who come to this program completely with their life in shambles and spend about 2 to 3 months and get to go back home fully integrating in their life, back to school, back to work, back to their kids and their life and the things that mean the most to them, and knowing how to use ERP to get freedom. And so, yeah, I don't wish OCD on my worst enemy. None of us would. That, it's a terrible and cruel disease when you're struggling with it. Yet what I will tell you is that because of my struggle, I truly do know my strength, and it has taught me so much. And I feel so convicted that I am who I am because of how I understood how to fight it, the resilience that was built, the struggle that I had to go through, and the way I had to learn how to come out and had to learn that I actually could make those choices. Like, we make the choice to empower our OCD, or we make the choice to diminish our OCD. It's a hard
Yeah.
choice. It's a
Yeah.
triggering choice, but it is ours to make.
Okay, you have such a beautiful. I could sit here and talk to you all day. It's a beautiful story, a beautiful message. Now I'm going to ask you to put on your professorial hat a little bit, your therapist hat a little bit. You hear about different therapies: ERP, exposure and response prevention. You hear acceptance and commitment. You hear there's other ones. I'm not even going to talk about those. ERP, and I've heard you say this 100,000 times. Right? It's a gold standard. But
Yep.
for our listeners today or those viewing, give us a 101 on ERP. What is it? How does it work? Right? Why is it
Yep.
successful? Why is it the gold standard? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, ERP is exactly what it sounds like, right? We're going to do exposures and we're going to engage in response prevention. So the exposures are, what are the things you're avoiding? What are the things that you're afraid of? What are the things that trigger you? What are the things that right now, when you do them or you are faced with them, you end up engaging in some sort of compulsive behavior to feel better? We want to face those things, do those exposures. Response prevention is the more important piece than exposure. This is where we prevent the response that OCD wants us to do. So typically we might, wash our hands. You might go back through that doorway. You might ask a reassurance question. You might do a mental prayer, neutralizing image, whatever it might be. You have to identify and understand what your rituals are, and you have to commit that you're not going to do those. And why? Like, why do we do that? Well, because what we're doing is when we have an intrusive thought and we do a ritual, or we engage in avoidance behavior, either way, we are reinforcing to our brain, we're sending a feedback loop to our brain that that intrusive thought is scary, it's dangerous, and I can't tolerate it. Where if I do ERP, which is I still might have that intrusive thought, but instead of doing a ritual, I sit with it. I let it be there. I respond to it as if I'm not afraid of it. The feedback loop I'm sending my brain is that I'm not afraid of you. I'm not scared of you, and I can tolerate you. And as we send that message to our brain actually backs down because it says, like, all right, this isn't working, right? Imagine if, like, you're fighting with someone and you're saying something and you can tell they don't care, they're not getting activated, they're totally ignored. You kind of stop fighting, right? Because you're like, okay, I'm not getting a response. And so that is where, like, we have the power to choose, are we going to do a ritual or not? Are there other interventions that can be added into ERP or used, or some people really like ACT? A lot of people love ACT analogies, or the way that they can, like, use ACT to better understand their OCD or their non-response or their engagement responses or all the things. That's awesome. That's great. Yes, that could be useful. ACT is still not the gold standard for OCD treatment. It is ERP. And here's what I will tell you, because so many people say, well, I did ERP, it doesn't work. I have never, to this day, right? And I've been doing this for a long time, decades. I have never met somebody that ERP didn't work for them if they were fully doing ERP. Now, I've met hundreds of people, myself included. I did this for about a decade and a half, where I kind of did ERP, right? I did a little bit of ERP here, but I wasn't willing to do it here. I had 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And so I got some benefit, but not a lot. But actually, I stayed stuck. And I am a perfect example of somebody who was still really struggling with my OCD, but, like, learning how to function with ERP. I used ERP every single day to, like, just allow me to function. And it was exhausting and it was daunting. And I would have been the poster child to tell you, ERP doesn't give you freedom. ERP doesn't fully work for OCD. I need to try a different intervention. But what we know and what I know is that I wasn't really doing ERP, right? I was kind of doing ERP, but I wasn't really doing ERP. And if we truly do ERP, it should be values based. It should feel good. It should feel empowering. It should be like when you face a fear head on, right? That you are excited, you're proud of yourself. I think about it like my kids. I get to see things every day in my kids that they become proud of, right? They don't think they can climb to the top of the playground. Do you think I sit there and I'm like, yeah, you probably can't do it. I agree. That's too scary. Oh, I'm like, I bet you can do it. You've done hard things. Like, let's go. Like, I'm going to be cheering you on, but you can do it. When they're like, Mom, I can't help me. I'm like, you don't need my help. I know you can do this. And yes, it is hard as a parent to watch them like be afraid and to sit on that playground climber for like 5 minutes midway through making a choice of whether they're going to keep going or not. But what happens when they make the choice to go and they get to the top? They're filled with pride and empowerment, and it creates momentum. But the next time they're at a rock climbing gym and they don't think they can go up, they remember they can do it and what that feeling is like. And ERP can do that same thing for you. And so I want to challenge you that if you're using ERP to function, that is not how we should be using ERP. We should be using ERP to address our OCD completely, the core fears, all the things. We go all the way with ERP so that we can truly get freedom from those fears and really detach the meaning and the anxiety attached to our OCD.
And there's a methodology. I mean, maybe it's not universal, but like hierarchies that when you talk about successes and using successes and momentum, right? Can you explain the hierarchy
Yeah. So, I
methodology?
mean, really, like we always want everything to be slow and systematic, and we want it to be done successfully, right? So, I'm not going to tell somebody start with your highest level exposure because guess what? The chance of you being able to do your highest level exposure without a ritual would mean you don't have OCD, right? You're not able to do that. We need to work you up to that. So, we're going to start with low level triggers and say, okay, what is something that would, yeah, be challenging, but you'd be willing to give it a try? Right? And we slowly and systematically work you up to it. I always love to tell this quick example about my daughter, but when she was about 2.5 years old, we were going to Austin to visit my nephew. And we got there and he had this electronic dinosaur. And it was kind of scary, to be honest. They like those things walk and they like light up eyes and you're kind of like this. Right? And she was terrified of it. She was so scared. She was hiding behind my legs and screaming, crying. And she kept saying, like, Mom, hide the dinosaur. I'm so scared, hide dinosaur. And so I automatically, as a mom, right, I look at my husband, Matt, and I'm like, Matt, hide the dinosaur. She's terrified. What are you doing? So he's like, oh, so he like grabs it and hides it. And she's like, I still see tail. I'm so scared. And I'm like, you couldn't even hide it good, right? I'm annoyed with him. He's like, oh my gosh. So he's like shoving it, right? And of course, as an ERP therapist, about 1 minute later, I'm like, what have I just done? Right? I've just reinforced to my kid that dinosaur is scary. You should be afraid of it. You can't tolerate it, and you wouldn't be able to handle approaching that dinosaur. So, of course, y'all know what I did. Like, I got the dinosaur down, right? But a lot of people think that ERP is this like torturous thing, and that what it would have meant is that I would have then got the dinosaur down and been like, you're going to bed, and thrown the dinosaur in her crib with her and made her just, get habituate and get used to the dinosaur. Like, of course not. That would be traumatic for my 2-year-old to have to be thrown in a crib by herself with this terrifying dinosaur. So what do you think I did? I got the dinosaur down and I said to her, I was like, Olivia, I know you're scared and it's okay to be scared, but we can't let being scared dictate what we do. And so we can do hard things, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to touch this dinosaur. We're not leaving until you play with it. And I got on the floor and I start playing with it, and slowly took her a minute. She makes her way over and she gets a little closer, and eventually she's sitting and playing with the dinosaur. And within probably 2 minutes, she's like, Mom, this dinosaur's so silly. It has pink lipstick, right? And she's laughing and she's not afraid of it. Now, the next day, when she came back downstairs and saw the dinosaur, she was still scared of it. She didn't have the same reaction. She wasn't as terrified, but she automatically was like, I'm scared of that dinosaur. Can you hide it? Right. And she said, can you not hide it? Right. At that point, and my immediate response was like, no, I'm not hiding the dinosaur, Olivia. We're going to play with it. And we did the same thing. And the next day we played with it. And by the third day, she actually was carrying the dinosaur around going, this is my friend. He's so cute. And guess what, guys? To this day, we still talk about that dinosaur in our house Because when she was afraid to go to the dentist or afraid, right, I started to say to her, but Olivia, remember what happened with the dinosaur? Yeah, I was scared, but then I actually like I faced it and I wasn't scared anymore. And that's what ERP is about. It's about, can we recognize that we have to approach our fears? We have to approach them consistently, right? We couldn't touch that dinosaur once and never touch it again. She would have still been afraid of it. We have to keep doing it. So you have to have frequency, but you have to commit that you're not going to reinforce the fear. And the way you reinforce OCD fears is through rituals. So we slowly and systematically work our way up, but we don't do an exposure that's triggering just once. We do it multiple times. And my key word I'm always listening for is when people say, hey, Liz, I think I'm doing something wrong. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, tell me. And they're like, I've been doing this exposure over and over again, but like, honestly, I'm really bored. And that's when I'm like, perfect, we're ready to move on to the next exposure. Because if you're bored, that tells me it's not triggering or activating you at all.
Yeah. So what do you say? I get this question a lot from the folks that I provide peer support to, but how do you motivate somebody when they're not successful in ERP, right? So it's like it would be great if you could just do it and get it done. But a lot of the times people are like, I can't do this right now. I can't do it. And then it would be horrible for somebody to come in and say, well, you're a failure. You're always going to fail. You're never going to get better,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. And like put them in the dungeon. So where's that balance, right? The motivation. Okay, you weren't successful, but. So we're filling that
Yeah.
blank.
So number one is this, right? I think the most important thing for people who are struggling with ERP is to meet other people who've done ERP and to hear about what ERP really is. Because I think a lot of times, first of all, there's a lot of bad ERP clinicians out there that are doing ERP incorrectly, that are using ERP as this fear factor. Let's just see how triggered you can be, that are having patients do things that I wouldn't do and I wouldn't have somebody do, right? That it actually trigger patients more and they're like, yeah, no, thanks. I'm not willing to do this method if that's what treatment's like. So number one, we want to educate people on what ERP really is and how it should get you back to your life and back to the things you want to do. And our exposure should be focused on what you're avoiding, not a random exposure that I think would trigger you. That's actually not useful at all, right? So that's number one. Number two is, can we really break down why ERP didn't work for you? So if ERP didn't work, I really want to spend time of like, why didn't it work? And what were you holding on to? And what were some of the stuck points that kept you stuck instead of allowed ERP to move forward? The first and most important thing I see a lot of is most patients with OCD have comorbid conditions. And sometimes what we're actually trying to use ERP for and fit it into this box is a different condition, right? So maybe somebody has a comorbid, has depression or comorbid personality disorder, lots of different things that are comorbid with OCD. We need to separate out what is OCD, what is another condition, and what are the evidence-based interventions for those? Because ERP is only evidence-based for OCD. It is not evidence-based for other disorders. So it's important for us to know what symptoms are what and what am I treating. But the second piece is, are we doing ERP correctly? Are we doing it in a values-based way? Are we doing it in a way that makes you feel good? And I really want to help motivate and instill hope. None of us, there's not a good ERP clinician out there who is doing ERP before the patient is ready to do ERP. So if somebody shows up, I should not be doing ERP day one, right? Day one, I'm doing readiness. I'm helping you understand ERP. I'm helping you get more bought into ERP for yourself than I am for you. I want my patients kind of like convincing me that they're ready to start exposures and telling me kind of, I'm ready to go, let's do it. And they're excited and motivated for it, not I'm debating and forcing and pushing them to do exposures they're not ready for.
All right. I'm mindful of the time here. So let me I want to ask two more questions and then we can go to some Q&A. The first is looking back um, on this, what would you say to family members um, or loved ones about maybe what are you don't have to give me the whole list, but like the most important things that a family
Thanks. Yeah.
member or loved one can bring to the table?
Yeah, I mean, number one is, remembering that they didn't choose this, they don't want this, they would do anything to not have OCD. They need your support and your love. They need you to be a mom, a dad, a sister, number one, right before a therapist. So be careful trying to jump into the I'm the therapist and be the family member, because that's really critical. Number two is obtain appropriate education, right? Use resources like Shannon, like the International OCD Foundation, like OCD Texas, right? But like trusted groups and clinicians who do evidence-based interventions, who are putting out material that is appropriate and accurate. There's a lot of bad education and material both online and on social media. So be thoughtful about where you're receiving education and material from. And then what I always tell people is, I want you to hold hope when your family member doesn't have that hope anymore. And sometimes they need you to be their champion and advocate, right? Searching for treatment options, and sometimes setting boundaries, right? The space intervention by Ellie Leibovitz is absolutely an incredible intervention for family members who are struggling to get their loved ones into treatment, or they're getting their loved ones to commit to treatment, so that they can understand steps and strategies they can take that would not just encourage, but set some pretty clear boundaries on what to do for that individual and how to so what it does, not what to do, but like what basically space does is it has parents remove the ways that they unintentionally are enabling them and making it where they don't have to go to treatment, and instead it puts them into kind of this choice of like, okay, the choice that I have at home is worse than the choice of treatment, so I'd rather go to treatment.
Okay, before I give you the final question, I'd like to say to everybody, if and Liz, you can fill in the blank on any of this, but if you're interested in Liz's work, and her the body of work, uh, basically just Google her name and you'll get 500 billion responses. But you're the director at the OCDI of
Yeah.
Texas. So tell us a little bit about OCDI of Texas. This isn't my final question for you. That's kind of an interim final question. I'm going to give you the opportunity to just talk about what you do, where you do it, how people can find more information.
Thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm the director and I run the OCD Institute of Texas, which is one of the three really kind of only OCD specific residential programs in the world. So all we do is treat the most severe and extreme OCD at the residential or day program level. So our patients come from all over the world, and they're typically with us for 2 to 3 months, engaging in treatment 24/7 if they're in our residential program, or 8 to 5, 8 to 4 if they're in our day program, and getting them to a place where they're returning to full functioning when they leave. Our outcomes are amazing. I'm certainly biased, but and I know that because this program saved my life and I get to watch it save other people's. But I'm just so proud of the work that we do. And as someone who runs the program, I can promise you our program is not just dedicated to treating patients with OCD, but our program is dedicated to treating and helping patients with all mental health disorders get the right help. If you come to our program and we're not the right fit, we don't keep you here. We don't take people's money that we can't help. We help get them connected to the right resources, because that's also really important. A lot of patients with OCD have comorbid conditions, and sometimes those other conditions become treatment interfering and actually need to be addressed first before they can get effective OCD treatment. I am never gonna let a patient leave our program thinking ERP doesn't work for them. If we're not the right fit, we're talking about that early on and why. And so what I want to encourage you to do as you think about treatment for yourself or a loved one is, you need to be looking into specialty OCD treatment. You do not want to go to a general practitioner. You don't want to go to someone who says they treat OCD, but they don't have background experience or training. So look at their training. Who did they get trained under? What sort of training did they do? Have they worked in one of the few residential programs, right? The only three that are true OCD specific are us, McLean, Boston, and Rogers Memorial, Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. Did they get training at a specialty clinic or from an individual who got training at a specialty clinic? Like, there's OCD world's still pretty small. So we want you to be really thoughtful about, do they have effective training to be treating me, to be treating my family member? Number one. Number two, are you looking at the right level of care? If you have severe OCD and you're homebound or you're not functioning, so you're not engaging in your vocation, school, work, family, whatever that might be for you because of your severity, outpatient is probably not the right level of care. So many people who say ERP doesn't work for me, it's not because ERP doesn't work, it's because you're not getting the right dose of it. right? You need a higher dose. And so think about that. There's outpatient level of care, day programs, and residential. You need to be thoughtful about what makes sense for you or your loved one. But again, specialty treatment, somebody who's had years of background and training in ERP is so, so important to look for. And specialty clinics like ours and other ones across the country, or clinics tied to academic programs, we offer sliding scale, we have scholarship programs, we have reduced rates. So don't let finances be a reason that you don't look into specialty care. Like most specialty care programs, I hope, if not, call me and I will advocate and find something for you. Because it's what I like. I do. It's so important to me. Have options for anyone.
That's awesome. And I haven't even ever been down there. I need to go down
You need to
and
come
see.
visit and see the program. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Your final question, and then I'll go to the chat room and find some questions for you. But when you introduced the keynote speaker at the IOCDF conference in Chicago, um, I was sitting there in the audience, just waiting to hear the keynote speaker, and then you got up and introduced her, and you talked about freedom, and you really impacted me, really resonated with me. I feel horrible because I didn't write down exactly what you said, and you probably won't even be able to duplicate exactly what you said. But I was going to use it because on Thursdays I do a video series called Great Thinkers Thursdays, and I wanted to use this quote about freedom. So I'm going to kind of put you on the spot, and it really is in the context of this question. So I am boxing you in a little bit, but so you say what you want, but I love the freedom stuff. If you could leave everyone watching with one truth about OCD recovery, what would it be?
The same truth I pitch everywhere, and which is a truth I know because I live it, which is that freedom is possible. And it is, most of us in our life are using ERP to function. And it's something that becomes daunting and exhausting. And we've started to accept and believe that living with severe OCD is something we will have to live with for the rest of our life, and that ERP can make us functional, but that we always have to do it and we'll always have to struggle and we always have to do treatment. Where what I want you to know and believe, not just because of my own life, but because of hundreds of other people's lives that I get to see, is that when you do ERP effectively and you address core fears, ERP can get you true freedom. And it can get you to a place where thoughts are thoughts, but they never become a trigger. And to me, that would be indicative for all of you that you're at a place of freedom from your OCD.
Okay. So I don't have any questions in the chat room, so I get to make them
I
up.
see
So if you have
someone's hand up.
oh,
LT.
okay,
Hand up.
LT. So I'm going to take LT off of mute and let LT ask the question. All right. Okay, LT, go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, she's on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah, you might have to unmute. Hold on right here. Here we go. There's two LTs on my thing. LT, can you just throw it in the chat?
Oh,
Is there a way?
hi,
Oh,
Oh, there
hi,
you go. There you go.
hi, Liz. It's Leah.
hi.
Hi, you remember me, right?
Yes.
Well, I'm walking my dogs and listening to you at the same time, and I think I pressed that by accident. But
Oh, okay. Well, it's great to see you.
no, but I don't mind. I'd love to ask you a question. I
All
don't
right,
know
Leah,
if
go ahead.
um well I'm in Massachusetts now, but I'm still sort of in the same position that I'm doing outpatient treatment twice a week, and I'm not free. I'm not in freedom. And so I guess, I mean, and maybe there isn't a question. I mean, I guess maybe I need to seriously think. Still haven't done residential, which I've been resisting. So I guess
Yeah, I
that's
think
the answer.
you probably answered your own question, but what I would tell you is that if you've continued to do outpatient and you guys are not making progress. So here's some signs of needing a higher level of care. So we're doing outpatient ERP, we're not making progress. We're doing outpatient ERP, but we're struggling to do our homework in between sessions, or we need extra support in between sessions. Those are all reasons to consider a higher level of care. The second piece, though, Leah and others, is of course you're scared. Like that, it would be weird if someone wasn't scared or skeptical or anxious about a higher level of care. That's our job, or whichever program you go to's job, is to help you become less anxious, more comfortable, and to create an environment where you feel safe and you can slowly and systematically do exposures that are going to empower you and make you feel amazing. Not, our goal is not to bring people here and just trigger you. If treatment is just triggering you and it's just exhausting and it's just all the time anxiety provoking, we're probably doing something wrong. Treatment should feel freeing, it should feel liberating, and it should feel really empowering. And that's one of the reasons, like our program, if anyone ever visits it or you go on our website and look, we have this very home-like environment, because for us, we want an environment where people feel safe and comfortable. They're going into the community, they're doing exposures, walking and out and about, because that's real life.
So how excited, Liz, are you about the future for OCD treatment? I mean, what is,
well, I mean, I'm
tell us
very
about it.
excited, but I'm very excited, and I have a little bit of anxiety. And here's what I have anxiety about. Bye, Sean. Great to see you. I have anxiety about messaging. I worry that we've seen a huge like explosion of advocates, which is awesome, right? That is so great to have so many people speaking out and advocating about OCD. Yet I worry about the fact that there's no control over messaging. And a lot of our advocates that are speaking really openly are really struggling. And they're talking about and sending the message sometimes that this is what treatment looks like. You always have to struggle. And I worry that that could be perpetuating some of people's lack of hope and belief in treatment being able to change their life. But I'm really excited about treatment. I'm always excited about treatment. And I'm excited because I know it can change your life. And I just hope that individuals are starting to understand the impact that anxiety has as a whole on society, and that at the end of the day, we actually can control our anxiety. We can control our triggers if we start facing them. It's when we try to control them by, doing rituals or things to feel better that they end up having total control over us.
Liz, I just one additional question, which is there's a McLean's OCD Institute in Massachusetts, and then there's yours. And I'm wondering if you both have the same goal of complete freedom, or if they're if they're different in that way.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, our program very much is very similar layout wise. We have a very different approach than Rogers, but myself and McLean Boston, our programs are the same in the sense of the structure and the way we do treatment and the clinicians you receive and what that looks like. The freedom language, I can't speak to. I think I've kind of coined that freedom over functioning language, and is really the language we use and how we've really trained our clinicians to be different in pushing people to think about recovery as freedom, as having no fear anymore, as not being afraid of what anxiety or OCD would throw at you. But I'm hopeful other programs are doing the same thing. And I see Matthew has a question.
Yep, there he is. Go ahead, Matthew.
Sure. I just want to say a huge thank you, Liz, because you inspired me so much with values-based exposures. This really got me out of the depths of OCD big time. Like one of my major subtype themes is visual autoretic OCD. And it's so debilitating, like all LCD themes. But doing it in a values-based way changed the landscape of everything. Instead of just white knuckling, like you say, it's where you live to thrive, thrive again, where OCD gets diminished, and doing it in step by step by step. Because I was also housebound with this, with just pure fear. And then it's just, again, learning that you can do it in a way that is effective, that you can do it where you're living your life, once again, the way you want to, not what OCD wants you to. And I wanted to thank you as well, because you helped me open up to my family about OCD. Because I remember asking you and Chris a question on one of the live streams and asked the experts. And I did all your advice. I showed them articles and videos online what this was, and it just felt such a burden lifted. And I was like,
I love that. I love all of this. I love this. Thank you, Matthew. Yeah. And I love all the advocacy you do in education. It's amazing watching and seeing you connect with others. Yeah, and I think that this is where treatment went so wrong. And again, traditional ERP is super like hierarchy based. It's very habituation based. It's kind of fear based. Like we're just like, doing and it kind of works. Like, I mean, it was the treatment that definitely helped me understand I could get better. But the freedom piece, like when you really get to transition from I'm doing ERP to function to freedom, that's when that values based stuff has to really come in, and we have to do that deeper core fear work so that it has no more attachment to us at all. I always tell people you can use ERP to like do fear extinction models. So like I'm no longer afraid of the doorknob if I touch it enough and don't wash my hands. But we all know there's 1,000 doorknobs. There's 1,000 other things, and it feels exhausting. And it's just like I have to do this to do that in this game of whack-a-mole. But if we actually do it while doing core fear work, we can get freedom from all the doorknobs, from all the things that are triggering for that same reason. So I love that. And it's all about incorporating values. And, it's funny, the biggest question I always get from clinicians is, I have a patient with da-da-da-da-da OCD. What exposure should I do? My response is the same. I'm like, I don't know. Ask the patient. like none of us like they know, and like just ask them, what are you avoiding? Because whatever we're avoiding would tell you what we actually want to get back to, what our value, what OCD is taking us away from, what's important to us, right? And that's what we should be focusing on, because when we get to see the freedom there and see the progress, but also like, oh, I don't have to, this doesn't have to control my life. We get to keep going. So I love that. And I'm so happy your family has now been educated and you're sharing with them. That's awesome. Thank you.
Hey, Matthew, thank you for joining us. I love everything that you do, and you've always been a friend and loyal supporter. So I'm going to move to Brody right now. Brody, you have a question for Liz.
Yes. Hi, Liz. It's nice to meet you.
You too.
So I was wondering, was your OCD very urge-based? I have a very urge-based OCD, and I'm trying to stop with the compulsions, like controlling the way my hands move or the way my tongue sits in my mouth or stuff like that. And I find that I still have my toe in the water because, like, I pop a mint in my mouth. I'm like, my tongue's out of control or whatever. And I guess I'm just wondering what you think about that.
Yeah, no, I think all OCD is urge-based, right? So the way we actually help people understand is something OCD or not is, does it feel urgent, right? That's like our number one question we ask, is because most things with OCD, when we're triggered, if it's not OCD, we're usually like, oh, I'll think about that later. I'll figure that out. Versus when it's OCD, it's like, I have to figure this out right now, right? I have to address this right now, or I have to do this ritual to feel better right now. And so treatment remains the same, and ERP for this type of OCD is still very, very successful.
Okay. Yeah, because I get into it with other people and they're very thought based, and I do get some thoughts, but it's very somatic. It's like a cross of like somatic and harm.
Yeah.
Something like
Well,
that's how I
and even
describe it.
like if you think about panic disorder doesn't always feel thought based. It feels more urge based, of like avoidance or doing behaviors or fleeing, but its treatment is still the same, right? It's still very clear CBT with exposure work.
Okay. Yeah, the urges are on the obsessional side. I know there's urges to do compulsions and stuff like that, but it's like it's definitely on the obsessional side for me. Like all like hands in the pockets, and I've gotten a lot better. But and I try less and less every time. Say I'm walking around the block and someone comes around. I used to be totally freaked out. Now I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna resist this less and less until I'm eventually completely free. But yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I would also encourage you, if you're working with the ERP provider, I want you to also think about how to do active exposures versus only like, can I start to reduce my rituals, right? Because the ritual reduction is really important, but we do need to add in some active exposures as well.
Sure. Yeah.
Although for you, a lot of just normal things like taking a walk is probably an exposure. So you're doing that as well.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, let me ask one final question, and then we'll cut our special guest, Liz. Liz, is there anything that now, but in recovery and maybe even as a therapist, so like the font of all knowledge here, that now that you wish you would have learned early on in your recovery?
Yeah, I mean, number one, I wish people were using languages around freedom instead of management, because I do think that this, like, you'll always have OCD, but you can learn to manage your symptoms, made me believe that, like, I was always going to struggle and I needed to accept that. And I really didn't believe that you could actually get to freedom, that I could live a life where, sure, I still have stickier thoughts than the normal person. I still have probably higher levels of anxiety than the normal person, but it dictates 0% of my life. And I wish I had really heard that more. And people with OCD deserve and should be hearing that more. And I think it sets you back if you don't actually believe that that's a possibility. The second piece I always tell people is that when we do ERP and core fear work, here's my goal. My goal for most people when you first start ERP is that you get to about 70% better. That you would tell me I'm 70% better. Most of us, if we got 70% better, we feel great, right? We'd be so happy that we're at 70%. And then I tell people, once you're 70% better, I want you to start going and living your life. I want you, because I find that last 30%, people just are not as motivated to work on because they're like, well, I'm already more functional. I don't really need to do that. That's not a big deal. Those things aren't as big of a deal as. But when they go live their life and they get a girlfriend, or they're they're hanging out with their kids, or they get this new job, or they are in college and they're having fun, that 30% starts to feel really daunting, right? And I had a patient once who's like, Liz, like, I used to do OCD all day long, and now, like, I'm only doing 5 to 10 minutes of rituals a day, but those 5 to 10 minutes are miserable and exhausting, and I want to get rid of them. And I'm like, great, right? And so I always tell people, I feel like there's this kind of like, you understand how to do ERP, you learn ERP, and you get like 70% better. And then you go live your life. And then that motivation to do that remaining 30% and to really do all the work and like go all the way and really get to freedom is really strong. The great news, and I tell patients this all the time, is like no patient leaves our program 100% better, because then I've kept them in this level of care way too long, right? They're only in res as long as they need to be in res. That would be a disservice to them. But I tell them the treatment doesn't change. So if you have really learned how to do ERP, and like I don't care if you leave being 100%, but I certainly care if you leave at 50 or 60% and you don't know how to get to 100%. Right? The most important piece is that even if you leave at 50, 60, 70%, you're going, I know what I need to do to get to that 100%. I just need to get myself to do it. And sometimes living life and starting to make life louder than OCD is what needs to happen in between for you to then be willing to kind of re-engage. So give yourself a lot of grace. Know that it's a process. Don't look at a ritual as a failure, right? Look at it as something you've learned, something you're going to grow from, something you might not do the next time. We always want to look at what are we learning? And you're having John Abramowitz on, and when you do his, and hopefully y'all will talk a lot about inhibitory learning, but my focus is less on, did you do a ritual? Did you do ERP perfectly, right? It's, what'd you learn? If you went ritualized, I don't really care if you ritualize, I can't stop you from doing it, but I want you to acknowledge that I learned that, man, after I started doing those rituals, I actually felt worse than before I did. That's important learning, right? And so a lot of this, it's a process, it's about learning, and it's slowly about understanding that you have the power to change your relationship with anxiety and OCD. Many times we start to say, we don't have the power, right? That's what I wish I would have known when I was younger, is that I had the power. And I think that was the biggest disservice, is that when I was sick, you were told it's a chronic condition. There was nothing you can do. You will always have OCD. And so you really thought and believed that like you had a broken brain versus, oh, okay, like, yeah, I'm predisposed and I have OCD, but I actually can totally change OCD and change the impact it has on my life and the power it has. And so you do have the choice and the power to get full freedom from your OCD. And that's the only thing I wish I would have known, because that changes everything and changes the way we understand and start to apply ERP to our life.
Amen. Amen. I want to thank you, Liz, for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you're busy, to meet with this group. Our audience wasn't huge, but this was the first one. We are pioneers. And I remember somebody asked me one day after I wrote my first book, which sounds arrogant to say, which means there were other books. But anyway, after my first book, they said I was a lawyer in the Department of the Navy and had a lot maybe to lose by coming out with my story. And one of the other lawyers asked me and says, why did you do this? are you sure that you really want to tell the world about this stuff? And I said, you know what? I want to help people. And so I knew that in order to help people, I had to be honest. And really, if I can say one thing that helped one person, it was all worth it, because
Right.
this disorder is so devastating,
Yeah.
right? Debilitating.
And I'll leave today just to say thank you for all that you're doing, Shannon. And one of the most impactful things I ever heard about OCD came from you. And I talk about this in group all the time. It was, I asked you one time, I said, do you consider yourself cured or managed, or how do you describe OCD? And you said something along the lines of, I don't really care how people describe it, and it doesn't really matter to me if I use the word cure or management, but I'm at a place in my life where I have no fear of anything OCD tries to throw at me. And I
Yeah.
talk about that as the leading example in our group all the time here at the program, that that's the goal. The goal is that we are not afraid of anxiety or OCD anymore. And when you're there, you're in recovery.
Well, I love you dearly. I think you're awesome. Thank you for your
I
friendship.
love
Thank
you
you for
too. Thank you for your work.
visiting us. Yeah. So everybody, thank you so much. I'll be posting about our next guest, Dr. Charlie Mansueto, who Liz knows very well. He'll be with us on Sunday. Spread the word. Let's get people in. All right. Thank you, Liz.
Thanks,
Thank you,
y'all.
everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.